The air in my mother's flat was smoky and close, sticky with the smell of roast lamb and onions. My older sister, Frieda, always insisted on sitting nearest to the window so she could flick her cigarette butts into the dirty gutter below. A thick strand of steam coiled up from her plate when she cut a slice of meat. Papa had taken his place at the head of the table, stacking slices of rye bread on his plate as if building a wall. The radio droned from the hallway, the volume just loud enough to drown out the arguments of neighbors above us. I picked at the fraying corner of the tablecloth. My script, a few folded pages filled with hasty notes and crossed-out words, bulged beneath my thigh where I'd shoved it before dinner. My chest built tightness with each passing moment, my ribs straining. This was it, I'd waited all week. Mama passed a bowl of green beans down the table to me. Her sleeve brushed my arm. "Eat, Leonie," she murmured. "You're thin again." I said nothing. The moment was swimming up, unavoidable. My heart drummed, fighting the old war between fear and defiance. At last, in a voice too soft, I tried anyway. I wanted to tell you all something." Frieda stabbed a bean and looked up from her phone, raising an eyebrow. Erich, my cousin, smirked. "Oh, here we go," he muttered, "some grand announcement." Papa's knife paused in midair. Mama sat very still. I swallowed, my mouth full of cotton. I've been writing a novel," I said, "and I've decided to try to publish it, maybe even become a novelist." Silence. Not even the radio kept on. It had snapped off in the bedroom, the batteries dead without warning. Outside, the window trams groaned past in Kreuzberg, the sound shifting through the pane. Papa snorted, the sound guttural and quick. "A novelist like Goethe or Kästner, ja." His laughter came out cold and tight. "Leonie, that's sweet," Frieda said with a wry, dismissive smile. "But do you know how many people get books published? 1 in 1,000. It's adorable, honestly." "It's ridiculous," Erich cut in. "You're almost 30 and you want to play dress-up as a writer now." My first instinct was to shrink. The urge ran deep, rooted by years of these dinners, each a new test, another chance to trip. But my stomach churned with old irritation. "It isn't just play acting. I've finished the first draft. It's not just a hobby." Papa shoved his plate away as if he'd found mold on the meat. "When your mother and I came here, we had nothing. I put away money from every shift, and you," he pointed a knuckled finger, "you want to write little stories. How will you pay rent with that? I'm already working nights, you know that." "Not enough," he cut in. "You always wait for fairy tales. Berlin doesn't care about your stories, Leonie." Mama's voice wavered. "Papa, it's her dream." "We all have dreams. Dreams don't pay for food." He turned his head sharply, as if even the mention of hope was a poison. "We gave you a life so you wouldn't have to worry, not so you'd throw it away." Frieda rolled her eyes. "Just say thank you, Leo, and send your little book to the trash. Get a real job." I felt raw then, my pulse pounding behind my eyes, but I said nothing more, letting the shame and anger collect in my spine. For the rest of the meal, half an hour at least, I choked down tasteless bites, nodding through conversation as if I was somewhere else. When everyone turned to the tired politics of the city, I excused myself to the bathroom and didn't come back for a long while. Later that night, walking home past the Turkish bakery where closing time steam floated out onto the tiles, I let myself curse them under my breath. But even as I tried to cast off the sting of their laughter, it clung. At home, I folded the manuscript again and backed it into a drawer. I lay awake listening to rain tap on the window, repeating Frieda's words. "It's adorable, honestly." The shame pooled in me. I promised beneath breath and covers that they would see I had meant everything. For the better part of 2 years, shame was my companion. It hollowed out the same space as hope, a twin that pressed sharp against the ribs when I dared to dream. I held on to my job at the pharmacy on Oranienstrasse, working into the evenings and scribbling edits into a notebook behind the counter during lunch. Sometimes a flash of dialogue came like lightning, sometimes I wrote rubbish only to strike it out that night. I read failed novelist in every face that passed through the doors. Anytime my phone lit up with a message from Frieda or Mama, I felt a ghost of fear. When invitations arrived for birthdays, for holidays, I invented excuses, overtime, sickness. But Berlin was vast enough for someone invisible. I sent the novel, now on its 6th draft, out to every publisher's address I could scrounge up. I wrote cover letters until my mouth went dry. Each time a new batch of "thank you but we are not looking for," or "unfortunately your manuscript does not," arrived by email. It became routine, the cycle repeated with the seasons. Unshaven mornings, clammy hands on the tram, scrawled notes in the margins of napkins, the mechanical twist of the pill bottle caps. Sometimes, late at night, I reread old messages and felt myself dissolve. I wondered if Papa's certainty had infected me beyond repair. One morning, after a run of brutal late shifts, I sat at my tiny kitchen table, spooning cold oats from a cracked bowl. The sun pooled on the floorboards in a square of pale gold. My head ached, but I opened my email. The subject line read simply, "Novel submission, Frau Weber." My hand hovered above the mouse. For a second, I didn't remember how to breathe. It was not another rejection. I read it once, then again, comprehension leaping and falling like a faulty elevator. It was a yes. The editor, Iris Grohl from Kleinfeld Verlag, loved the manuscript. She wanted to buy it to discuss edits and next steps. "There's honesty here," she wrote, "something Berlin needs right now." I wept then, silent and ugly, my face pressed to my hands. I wanted to run through the streets, banging on every flat's door just to show them the message. I wanted to call Mama and shout at the top of my lungs, yet I simply sat, breathing hard, letting the tide shift. For the next several months I dove headlong into revisions. Iris made notes in the margins. "Maury here, how does she feel? Show the city, let us see it." My hands cramped from hours of typing, my wrists wrapped in cheap elastic braces. On some days, old fear came back. What if the first draft was a fluke? What if the changes killed what made the book worth reading? But each round made it cleaner. It sharpened the story, let my hair thin grow. I wrote of Berlin as I'd always known it, dirty and lyrical, full of hope that choked as often as it soared. The months accumulated in a haze of edits, proofs, and covers. The day the first print copy arrived in the post, I peeled it open on my kitchen table. The cover was stark white, the title in dark, simple script, Warten Auf Berlin, under my own name. My hands shook as I held it up, the smell of ink and paper crackling out. The next few weeks rushed by, reviews, not just online but real ones in the Berliner Zeitung. I read every word, line after line, about the raw honesty, the vivid characters. "There is music here under the grime," one wrote. For the launch, the publisher booked a reading at a bookshop in Mitt. There would be, my publicist said, a signing and maybe local radio would come by to record. There, in the quiet after another interview, I stopped and realized I had done it. I had what I wanted. The book was out. My name was in the city's windows, in the hands of strangers on trams. For a while, I forgot I had ever eaten dinner with shame for dessert. The launch party was held in a repurposed warehouse, with shelves lined in burlap and lights strung overhead. It was a far cry from the family table, and yet, when I looked out at the rows of folding chairs, I saw them. Frieda perched on one side wearing her best black blazer, Mama clutching a program in her lap. Papa ramrod straight in his short woolen coat, his face stonier than Kreuzberg's oldest pavement. Erich, too, trailed in, his usual smirk gone. I did not call to them at first. I let the evening draw on, reading passages, answering questions for timid students and eager old women. People asked about my life, my job, whether this story was truly my own. "A version of it," I told them. Some faces I spotted from the pharmacy. A few people snapped photos, tagging me on their feeds. There was applause, even laughter. When it was over, the room buzzed with voices. The shop staff carried trays of glühwein and hard gingerbread among the guests. Near the back, my family stayed huddled, the island I'd always known, and tried to escape. For a moment, I tried to guess what they saw, a cousin, a daughter, or something else. I crossed to them, one hand still gripping the sharp edge of the table, lest my knees betray me. Frieda looked me up and down, her lip quivering in an unfinished smile. "So, famous novelist now, you look almost presentable." Her voice was light, but there was awe under it. Mama's eyes brimmed, her hands gripping the program so tightly that it warped. "Leonie," she said, reaching out to press my hand, "that was beautiful, really." Erich for once was silent. It was Papa who spoke next. He glanced around at the stacks of my book, the posters with my face, the people standing in line for me to sign a page. He grunted harshly at first. "Doesn't look so ridiculous now, does it?" His voice stumbled at the end, turning softer, so low I barely heard it. "You did something real." I looked at him directly, fear draining from my body in a slow tide. "I did." The old tension in his nose relaxed. Well, your mother wants you to come after, for dinner, proper dinner. Your grandmother would have been proud." My voice wavered in reply. "I'd like that." Something in us shifted, something loose, unknotted. It was more than approval, it was release. The rest of the evening blurred together. Strangers with my book, young journalists asking about my influences, an old teacher praising me in hesitant English. My family watched it all, no longer above or to the side, but in the thick of it. Frieda even helped stack the sign-in sheets when the room emptied. "You did it," she whispered. "You really did." Going home was not a grand movie scene, no fireworks. It was a taxi through cold streets, the city gliding by in streaks of sodium light. The next Sunday we gathered at Mama's again. The table was set with fresh flowers, the air was clear, the old smoke exhaled outside. No one mocked my story, they asked questions, careful and real. What would I write next? Did I miss the old job? Would I travel? Between dishes, Papa poured me a glass of wine, his best bottle, and raised his glass. "Auf dich, Leonie," he said, "to you, may your Berlin always find you." We drank, and in the quiet some gaps closed without words. I saw it in the softened way Frieda teased, in how Mama asked about my readings, in how Papa refilled my plate even when I protested I'd had enough. That night after they'd cleared away the plates and turned down the lights, I slipped into my old room. The walls still wore the scars of teenage years, scratched initials, faded posters. There on the shelf, Mama had set my book beside the photo albums. On the title page, she had tucked a note. "I always knew, even when you didn't. Liebe Mama." I held the book to my chest and let memory rise and settle. I owed her a better world, and maybe, finally, I had built it. All of Berlin stretched out beyond the window, insomniac and alive. I did not know what I would write next, but as I stepped out into the quiet hall, I felt taken back, no longer an exile but a daughter returned, not triumphant, just real and finally home.